Hello again, I'm Greg. This is part 4 of section 4 of our journey through modern hermeneutics. This is the place of dialogue in the social world. Okay? Gadamer has a famous phrase called the fusion of horizons. We're going to be taking a quick look at that, as well as his equally famous phrase, the confrontation with tradition. Okay? I'm going to juxtapose those and contrast both those ideas with the more mundane pattern of our interactions in the social world. So we're going to talk about fronting and confusing versus confronting and fusing. Okay? So first, let us then regroup. The social world requires the life world to mediate between it and the unknown intent of the cosmos, which we take today to be both anonymous and without human interest. That a child is born, that a person dies, these are no longer signs of anything but a developing and then declining organicity. In this, each of us mimics the rise and fall of civilizations, persons grouped into cultures and thence writ historically large. For us, the cosmos intends itself. Its presence means that non-presence is for now not the default, just as does the presence of life, and thence consciousness. Tell us that their respective absences are as well not a necessity to either the cosmic order or for that matter, to the quantum disorder. To speak in mythological terms one final time, it is our Promethean interpretation of the universe which grants us the ability to aspire thereto. Yet, if the social world needs the life world's mediating properties, it nevertheless cannot afford to embrace it completely. To do so would be to retreat into timeless primordiality, the truer end of history, unlike some politically inclined definition thereof. And one might well be suspicious of all regressive social movements along these very lines, indeed. Instead of this, with a view toward human futurity and of negotiating individuating human finitude as designs being ahead of itself, we parley through an ongoing dialogue between social world and life world, an expression rather of indefinitude. Okay? That's another new phenomenological concept. Indefinitude, equally human, but fully equipped with the contemporary hermeneutics. Let us now explore the ins and outs of this fourth and final version of interpretation and understanding in order to more fully comprehend the mode of being which indeed lives and lives on within its ambit. Okay, so as I mentioned, Gadamer speaks both of the confrontation with the tradition and the fusion of horizons. It is not so much that I, in my own small way, am writing history proper as I am living in it, but my existence is part of a history over which I do have some control. My ongoingness must both face up to history and thence also face it down. This is the dialogic process of being in the face of, Heidegger's consistent tense, which implies confrontation. Here, the call to conscience exhorts us to such action. Ethically, it bears Christian overtones, but objectively, it is simply a phenomenological instantiation of the Socratic dialogue, critical, suspicious, authenticating, disentangling. But in Gadamer, the conception of dialogue changes from being a mere aspect of hermeneutics, a manner by which the interpretive arc is sometimes accomplished, for instance, to its central figure. In dialogic hermeneutics, thusly, the confrontation with the tradition does not allow me to maintain my own epistemological integrity. The movement away from such positioning was afoot with Heidegger's critique of Dilthey's epistemological-oriented sense of historicality. Instead, famously, Heidegger stated that it must rather become an ontological question, and this authentic question of being, when we are ourselves confronted with not only the weight of history, but also the presence of the world itself. I am of a different order of being than either, and not merely one who stands in an alternate spot, replete with viewpoint and other technical or historical apparatus. For Gadamer, we need not be as radically opposed to Diltheyan sensibilities. In a way, Gadamer splits the difference between his mentor and his forebear, stating that when one places oneself at risk through authentic dialogue, the ontological moment is, after all, present. But at the same time, this selfhood must be thought of as a design which risks itself. We may refract our being into a self, which is known ontically and epistemologically, but the entire purpose of dialogue is to disclose our humanity to the other, and therefore exceeds such an onticity, let us call it. Okay? Again, the entire purpose of dialogue, authentic and authenticating dialogue, is to disclose our humanity to the other. Okay? There's a lot of things that get in the way of our humaneness, certainly, but also even our humanity itself, right? We tend to hang our hats up on gender and ethnicity and even demographic perhaps even politics, we mistake the trappings, the window dressing, for the real thing. Okay? So behind all that, beneath all of that, and before all of that, there is this common humanity which we share. And authentic dialogue in modern hermeneutics, especially in dialogic hermeneutics, for obvious reasons, is meant to disclose that to the other and to give her a sense that she can do the same for me. This auto-ontology that dialogue promotes does so by at first confronting the very part of the life world which cleaves most seamlessly to the social world. This is the tradition, what is customary in both action and thought, and with some irony, what is accepted as most needless of authentic act, and is thus also most unthought. For we have seen that the social world operates, must needs do so on assumption and presumption both. It is never the space of questioning, nor of dialogue. Such is reserved for the discursive ambit of the life world, which is why we can casually suggest from time to time that this or that discussion is academic, having no real-time or pragmatic implications for the social world. This is how wedded we are to the most obvious of the three worlds our Dasein occupies. The social world includes the vast majority of both the paramount wide-awake reality and a goodly portion of the life world's historical elements. Both mores and morality are lensed through the social world, and even ethics occurs as action within its bounds. Yes, we can initiate a dialogue about ethics, say, and this takes place in the discursive part of the life world, but unless some action follows hard upon such a dialogue, its value is made lesser through its disconnected instance. Yet, Gadamer points out that dialogue, even if taking place solely in the life world, does indeed have an ontological disposition, and even a real effect. I am changed by it, and through it. Therefore, anything I do afterward will be somewhat different than it might have been had the dialogue never taken place. In the fourth form of hermeneutics, then, we understand our place in the social world only through an ongoing and authenticating dialogue with the life world. Dialogue actually places the life world in the face of the social world, just as it places myself similarly oriented toward the tradition. Dialogue accomplishes both, because in risking my selfhood I am disclosing my Dasein to the other. Of course, none of this is an instantaneous affair. I, as a self who speaks about beingness, must be willing to perform a reduction upon myself. This is a form of phenomenological bracketing, writ small, if you will, whereby I place aside my biases regarding the other and understand that she does the same regarding myself. These biases dwell in the social world far more so than they appear in the life world. And so, my personalist reduction is of the same tenor as is that Husserlian. I am bracketing to one side elements which are at once hyletic, they have material implications for my life's ongoingness, let's say, and ontic, they are framed by epistemology and know-how, as contrasted with being. Note that I did not use opposed to just then. This is also a clue to Gadamer's understanding of hermeneutics when juxtaposed with Heidegger's. We are not trying to shift the entire space of its presence, as in the movement from knowing to being entailed, but rather adjust its focus and orientation, this time from transcending historical presence in a manner that leads to the discourse surrounding ethics and aesthetics, and instead taking the view that both have within them already this ability, this power, without having themselves to hitch up to a wider ontological frame. Indeed, Gadamer suggests that both art and action in the social world are already and always both uplinks to the life world, the one through an aesthetic consciousness, which includes the entire tradition of such works and their ongoing presence as points of Aufheben, and the other by way of its momentary overcoming of the socius. And beyond that, they are also representatives of it. This is one reason why Gadamer concentrates so much in Truth and Method upon aesthetic consciousness. Art is a model, not of life, but instead for the disclosure of being in the world as a living force. Okay? Once again, art is a model not of life, but instead for the disclosure of being in the world as a living force. This being, then, is capable of action beyond what is customary. It may even alter the sensibilities surrounding custom over time, which in itself demonstrates Gadamer's suggestion that when we confront any part of the tradition which otherwise unquestioningly envelops us, we as well take part in both dialogue and dialectic. In a word, if we act in the light of art's presence in the world, and by this it is meant that the social world and life world coexist, then our action cannot, almost by definition, be either what is customary or what is the expected. I have risked myself and disclosed my being. I do not know precisely the outcome of doing such a thing, But like Ricoeur's neighbor figure, I am unconcerned about this kind of outcome. I am, in my action, a dialogic vehicle for a dialectical movement, just as in an aesthetic object, which has disclosed part of the life world to the self, who before this encounter has attempted to indwell solely in that social. Through all of this, dialogue is revealed as the authenticity of the life world, its sole reason for being, and being differently to the social world is that the latter may gain some purchase upon its ontological grounds. As stated, the social world, by its own accounting, cannot afford to ask the questions the life world poses to both it and to the world itself. Speaking for now only about the former, the social world, it now becomes more clear that the life world engages in a self-authenticating dialogue at all times and in all places, and it is we, who are at first merely denizens of mundane reality and sociality alike, who must approach the life world, almost as if we were acolytes of Sophia herself. We must first engage with the life world in a most perfunctory manner. We solicit from it discursive elements, as when we learn mathematics, history, and the sciences in school. We are bringing these scant offerings bodily into the social world and making them an extension of what is customary, for it is expected that, by a certain age, we know this or that about the world. This connotation of praxis as mere augmentation of hexis is, in fact, the greatest scandal of contemporary education. Okay? So we're taking, all the way through the university and even in advanced degrees, we're taking the idea of practice, right? The idea that discourse and life world and theory can activate themselves in the world and change it. Instead, we tend to treat in these institutions and in these education systems praxis as if it was just an advanced version of hexis or custom, okay? And any pedagogue, any philosopher, any ethicist would see, okay, this is not correct. This is absolutely wrong-headed and the wrong way to go about it. And that is why I'm calling it the greatest scandal of contemporary education. This is just an aside, obviously. For many of us, the absconding of small portions of the life world is the closest we come to Dasein's self-disclosure. Though it should be said that this is hardly enough. We cannot focus upon the shortcomings of the social world. Like the life world and the world itself, it is what it is, and nothing more. Each of the three worlds in which Dasein dwells and seeks, with varying degrees of both competency as well as authenticity, to also indwell, must chart its own course, appropriate to its ends. But with dialogical hermeneutics we have, for the first time, a way in which to interpret the social world rather than to analyze its structures, as did phenomenology a generation before. Part of this is, inevitably, itself an extension of social phenomenology, microsociology, and even other related nuances such as urban anthropology and institutional ethnography. But what sets contemporary hermeneutics apart from any and all of these is that its ontological outcomes have not altered. Dialogue as dialectic discloses Dasein unto itself. Dialogue as dialectic discloses Dasein unto itself. What does this mean? For phenomenological hermeneutics, the reduction was seen as the most radical manner of getting at the essence of what makes me human. I am a being who is ahead of myself, as well as one indwelling of anxiety. My existence is cast as finitude. I am a finitudinal being, and yet I am also one resolute, indeed running along in the face of death. I am subject to distractions, such that my Dasein becomes entangled by the hyletic and with the ontic. Even so, within these damaging folds I encounter Mitsein, and through this being with, I regain my ability to self-disclose and authenticate my Dasein unto another. Yet all of this could come across as overwrought. For the student of the social world as it is, one could understand a comment like Schutz's regarding his mentor's relationship to death as being, quote-unquote, perfectly phony. It's really amusing. This is cited in Maurice Natanson in one of his essays, yes. Alfred Schutz confided in him. Natanson, of course, was a colleague and a student of Schutz, and Schutz was a student of Heidegger, and then Schutz says, Heidegger, he doesn't know anything about death. This relationship to death is perfectly phony. So this is it's certainly a statement, and we have to take it seriously because it's coming from a philosophical source. This sounds harsh. But if we take it in the light of our ontical preoccupations, right, we are anxious not so much about death, but rather about everyday issues, right? The existential anxiety that Heidegger concentrates on is one which comes into focus only in a specific phase of life and not over the life course entire, right? If we were constantly anxious about this existentiality of ours, our finitudinal being, we would quickly drive ourselves sort of round the bend, as it were. We would become as a kind of living and walking death ourselves. Okay? So obviously we don't do that, right? It's considered to be pathological indeed to do something like that day in, day out. So we can understand Alfred Schutz's sort of criticism, however apocryphal it may be. I trust Maurice Nathanson, of course, is one of my favorite authors. But there is this sense that, okay, yeah, nobody does that. Okay, so let's sort of work around that. Let's get beyond that. And then when we do, we begin to understand that disclosure, even that of an essential element of Dazein's makeup, though it may be completed through the call to conscience, which obtrudes into sociology and strikes across it, not unlike the Durchstreikung we saw deconstructing a textual concept, it does not in fact begin with this radical presence. This is one of Gadamer's chief points, that the action of the social world impels me to regain my authenticity in its face, just as does the weight of tradition compel me to confront it. It is almost as if we had in our possession, between social phenomenology and Schutz and phenomenological hermeneutics in Heidegger, two sides of the coin, which Gadamer and Ricoeur later recognize as singular. Each aspect of modern existence redacts the other. Phenomenology, in its transcendental aspiration, reduces the social world to a place filler. Yet in its analytic guise, it gives the appearance of exalting the same. This is a tension, however, within phenomenology itself, and this as a discourse committed to the dismantling of discursive structures as they had been known to date. This is why Husserl can refer to its work as the ultimate or even pure science, just as Aristotle long before could describe metaphysics as the first and last science. Gadamer puts this internal tension in its hermeneutic place by calling our attention to the reality of where and whence, between whom dialogue actually takes place. Even more so, he asks us to consider the how of dialogue. How do we engage? The order in authenticating self-disclosure, the other. How do we engage the other in authenticating self-disclosure? Do we attempt a phenomenological reduction? Do we enumerate and then analyze the multiple realities? Do we yet frame the other as an instance of the radical otherness of anxiety itself? No, we do none of those things, okay? Needless to say, we do not perform any of these kinds of operations. Instead, but not necessarily in their stead, what we actually do is approach the other as if she were an incarnation of a limited Sophia. She does not know all, to be sure, but even so she knows something I myself do not. Only through authentic dialogue can this knowing otherness be disclosed, and for each of us. The way, into such a mutual space of indwelling, itself a form of Mitsein, being with, does not require a structural analytic of sociality, nor does it confront itself through shedding the entirety of the social world. Yet two of Gadamer's key analytic points are indeed involved. Okay? First, again, the confrontation with the tradition. I must work through the edifice of what she is, appearing to me as a fellow human, a contemporary, as a woman, and as an other. I must ask, however, tacitly, what does it mean to be all of these things, and at once? Once again, the task of interpretation, this time of for and of the world, is to generate meaning but then move toward meaningfulness, and nothing of these categorizations can accomplish the second. Sometimes it is truly the case that I must come to know the other intimately and over the longer term before I can authentically say, and in all honesty, that I have come to know her as she is. Very often, when this does indeed occur, I thence lose her, either her friendship whole, if this is the relationship, or more radically, her companionship. But this is neither a necessary outcome, nor the only possibility for Dazein's uttermost disclosure. This is so because the lesson imparted is of a common humanity. What I share with her is more important, and by far, than our differences. Just here, then, is where the second point appears, that of the fusion of horizons. This is meaningfulness dismantling meaning. It acts as its own strike-through, though a most personalist one. Now, whether or not I myself can overcome the confrontation with difference she in turn confronts me with is another matter, and one which involves ethics, even more so than hermeneutics. Given this, we may find ourselves rehearsing another essential aspect of Dazein's indwelling, that of indefinitude. Okay, remember that new concept. Within Mitsein, within being with, I am partnered to the most personal of otherness. It is the far cry of the radical other made into the pillow talk of sociality. Love, seen in this light, appears to us as miraculous. How is it that once total strangers become the best of friends? How is it that someone I did not even know existed is transformed, nay, transfigured, into the one I cannot live without? We rely in the social world upon poetry and like work to express such wonder, but in so doing we avoid the truer confrontation with both otherness and with selfhood. Our tendency is to imagine that ourselves simply bump into another self, kindred to us, but heretofore unknown. In so doing, we think that the both of us emerge from this encounter not unchanged in some sense of experience or even character, but in spite of this, remaining the whole self, which is autochthonous to my experience alone. Dialogic hermeneutics in its ethical stance gives the lie to this self-obviation and avoidance of confrontation. Here, the passions may entangle, but they do not disclose. No, rather what occurs, if the experience is in fact more than a customary social encounter which never departs the expected, is that I am myself altered in my being. I am, quite existentially and anxiously alike, no longer the same person as I was beforehand. Now, this may sound trite or yet fulsome, but let us take it as a part and parcel of the dialectical hermeneutics relies upon. I am the thesis, she is the antithesis. If there is to be an honest synthesis, as we idealize marriage, for example, to be, we must first confront that which rests in each respectively, which in turn thwarts any Aufhebung. But this is not enough. We must also be willing to discard it. This is the reduction which love for one performs. Contractual relationships, those found in professional circumstance and wholly within the public bounds of the social world, do not reduce the self, they merely redact it. We may imagine we are in fact bracketing out aspects of our personhood, or yet our character in order to function within this or that social context. Even marriage, seen in this kind of sociologistic light, could function as a mere contraption of calculated and joint redaction. But our ideal of long-term intimate relations is not of this sense at all. Indeed, we tend to initiate a separation if the relationship is seen as forcing us to give up too much of ourselves. This is such a commonplace sense that it has become cliché in the extreme. We could very well be accused of being unwilling to authentically risk ourselves in the relationship's ongoing attempts at dialogue. But, to be fair, we might equally be excused along the lines that we have never been sure of the same level of commitment of the other. It is clearly a delicate balance, and one that requires constant and vigilant interpretation, not only of the other's intents, but of our own viewpoints in themselves. That the social world is most genuine to the self through love and its relations allows us the epiphany associated with the truest reality, being love. But this can be so only within the sociality of said world. Just so, it is the going rate in much of the life world, just as it has no meaning whatsoever for the world itself. Okay, so that was quite lengthy. There are a number of new concepts introduced, so I would ask you to view again at your leisure, and we're going to continue with part 5 next time. So thanks again for listening.